In 2019, YouTube was caught violating the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies that are meant to serve as a smokescreen so they can dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. As such, for my own protection, it is my obligation to advise you that this video is not aimed at children. My target audience is not children. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everybody doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome to Sentinel Reviews. Today, we will finally be getting that long-awaited project that I've said forever I will be doing. We will be looking at the Big Finish spin-off, Countermeasures, starting with Series 1, released in July of 2012, directed by Ken Bentley. Countermeasures stars Simon Williams as Group Captain Ian Gilmore, Pamela Salem as Professor Rachel Jensen, Karen Gledhill as Dr. Allison Williams, and Hugh Ross as Sir Toby Kinsella, a new character created for this series. As always, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place because I do this unscripted, so it's there just in case I do decide to discuss spoilers. If you don't want to be spoiled, in the description box below will be the link to Big Finish's website where you can buy Countermeasures Series 1. Also, I just found this out the other day, Countermeasures Series 1 and Series 2 are available for free to listen to on Spotify, so that is an option as well. I just don't know how to link to Spotify. And also, so again, this is an earlier box set as well, so we will be going into the 4 segments, discussing the 4 individual stories, before ending on the overview. So without any further ado, let's get started. Before we begin properly, I just want to mention real quick, because I forgot to do this in the introduction, Countermeasures is the team the 7th Doctor and Ace joined forces with in remembrance of the Daleks. The premise of Countermeasures is that they were a counterinsurgency group, very active during the 60s, and they essentially laid the groundwork for what would become UNIT. With that in mind, Countermeasure Series 1 opens with Threshold, written by Paul Finch. Now, Threshold is a very ambitious start to the series that mostly pays off. There are a few down points, mainly in the sound design. Actually, the sound design across the entire series is very inconsistent. I'll try to save that more for the overview though. But Threshold opens with just a cacophony of noise. And I've heard this story several times now, and I still don't know what it means. So it starts with a bunch of just indiscriminate loud noises, and then a garbled news broadcast, and then the cold open of the story. And I have no idea what it means. I don't know if it ties into what's going on in the story or what have you. But basically, Threshold starts us off with the team kind of in dire straits. After the events of Remembrance of the Daleks, Group Captain Ian Gilmore has requested, an agency be formed to face, unknown threats. And, at the start of the series, he is trying to put together more of a budget. He's trying to put together more of a team, but Sir Toby Kinsella says they have to make do with the resources they have. Toby is sort of, what's a good way to explain it? He is the government liaison for Countermeasures. So while the team is out in the field doing missions and stuff, he is handling things on the political side. So he's trying to secure funding and resources. And, he's a politician, essentially. I'll try to talk more about Toby as the series goes on, because he is a fascinating character. Also interesting, Allison is sort of the scientific consultant, and Rachel has not joined the team yet. Basically, she has her own research and projects going on back at Cambridge, and she's decided not to join Countermeasures at this point. Spoiler, by the end of the story, she will join Countermeasures, but not yet. Basically, she's on leave from her project. She's kind of overworked herself, and the people in charge of this experiment she's been working on have told her to take a break, at which point she has decided to spend time with Allison. And she is eventually requisitioned to help Countermeasures on the case they're working on. The case is an old doctor named Dr. Schumann has been discovered working on a teleporter. And, he's been found in a delirious state, and no one knows what this teleporter has done or if it even works. Boy, that's a really poor summary, but I'm trying to be sort of cagey. I'm trying to be sort of tight-lipped on the spoilers as much as possible because Countermeasures is a spy thriller mystery series. And if you know what's going on, it kind of ruins the mystery. Very few series, can tell you what's going on and you still be engaged in the mystery. Oh boy. Anyway, so as I mentioned earlier, Threshold is a really ambitious story to start on. For one thing, the threat here is extraterrestrial. Now, Countermeasures does not do extraterrestrial very often. It is still a sci-fi series, but the threats are more Earth-based. Rival agents and other spies and stuff like that. It will get alien, don't worry, but that more happens later on down the line, especially in the new Countermeasures. So to start off with a story like this, and with a threat like this, like I said, it's ambitious, and because of the sound design, it doesn't always pay off, Like I mentioned earlier, that just opening sequence of just incoherent noises, there's a lot of that throughout this story, and you kind of just don't, and you kind of have to pause, go back and re-listen a lot, because you're just like, what just happened? I also think, again, going back to how ambitious Threshold is, starting off with a sort of Lovecraftian, inexplicable eldritch horror might have been too big for your first story, because the other threats in the remainder of the series don't quite measure up to what they were facing in Threshold. There are also other elements to factor in as well. For example, one of the major side characters in this story is a member of Gilmore's battalion, who, after coming back from the war, this is set in the 60s during the Cold War, so World War I and II get mentioned a lot. After coming back from the war with Gilmore, he has had an absolutely terrible life. And, the threat of this story preys on that. The problem is, it happens so quickly, not enough time is devoted to it. And I think it could have benefited from that because, this character does the tragic sacrifice to stop the threat at the end of the story. Also, one thing I really want to praise this story for, the atmosphere is absolutely amazing. That's where this story absolutely shines. Threshold is terrifying. So, because he couldn't secure funding or facilities, Dr. Schumann, the man who built the teleporter, was working in an abandoned factory. And when the team investigates, there's all these sort of weird phenomenon, mysterious noises, voices, what have you. And the sound and music is just absolutely chilling. It creates a beautiful ambiance. And there's a scene right in the third act, right towards the end, where Rachel is investigating Professor Schumann's caravan that, oh my god, is absolutely horrifying. I know I keep saying that. It's so chilling, it's so terrifying, but there is no other way to describe it. There's especially a scene with a doll that Schumann teleported, and even just on audio, dolls are really freaking creepy. Even though it is overly ambitious, Threshold is a promising start to the series, and it does get you hyped up to go on. Moving right along, the series continues with Artificial Intelligence by Matt Fitton. At the end of Threshold, as I mentioned, Rachel officially joined Countermeasures, on the condition that she is the one in charge. I think Unit started coming out at around this time. I don't remember, though. And in the making of, they said, David Richardson said, and Ken Bentley, and John Dorney, who's the script editor for Countermeasures, they all said they wanted a scientist to be in charge to try and set this apart from Unit. It's a great move, and I think it really helps the series because it's not as military as Unit gets sometimes. Also, I want to say this. I'm probably going to say this a lot throughout these reviews, but Rachel is my favorite character in Countermeasures. Pamela Salem does a wonderful job. I'm also trying to tread lightly when it comes to talking about the performances, because they're consistently great for one thing, but also it's something I want to say for the overview as well. Artificial intelligence opens with a scientist or an engineer or something working on a super secret supercomputer project, killing himself. Yeah, bleak. Anyway, sorry, it's how the story opens, and there's no way to talk lightly around it. Anyway, worrying that the other people involved in this project might be in similar states of mind, the countermeasures team is asked to investigate and interview everyone involved, make sure they're of sound mind still. So, this supercomputer project, off the top of my head, I don't remember what exactly it is, but it involves three different projects sort of combined into one thing. Oh boy, and we're getting into technobabble here, which is why I'm having trouble summing it up, because I am not good with technobabble. It's why, of all the fan groups I participate in, I don't write my own stuff, because, oh god, I'm scared of technobabble. So anyway, the supercomputer project, it consists of three different projects. There's an old professor named Broderick. It's based on... What did he contribute? Shoot. Anyway, he's in charge of the project, and he's an old colleague of Rachel's. And then there is the project Rachel mentioned working on in the previous story, Threshold. Without her knowledge, it's been co-opted into this project. And Nadia Chovenka, a Czech defector who is an old flame of Ian's. And I'll talk about more of that in a minute. Anyway, her contribution to the project, it was a hallucinogen given to all the scientists and engineers. It allows them to communicate with the computer, and it lets their mind sort of become vulnerable to entering the machine. Essentially, it's a psychic computer that communicates, mentally with agents. And there is something interesting. Being an old colleague of Rachel's, and, the fact that her research is used in this computer, Professor Broderick modeled the interface on Rachel, so it uses her voice, and I think her likeness? I don't remember, though. Something Rachel is absolutely horrified by the way. But, a side effect of this is the hallucinogen Nadia makes, it heightens paranoia, so that's what's been going on. The agents and everyone involved are slowly becoming more and more paranoid until they act irrationally, amplified by the computer's thoughts in their heads. And that's really one of the highlights of this series, being the voice of Sinjin, the name of the computer. Pamela Salem just shines, both as Rachel and Sinjin. And as Sinjin, she gets absolutely terrifying. This is another story where the atmosphere is so good. And as we build up to the end of the story, it just continually ramps up, because it's not scary like Threshold was, but it is really tense. Especially once the computer starts affecting Rachel and Allison. There's a great scene in Toby's office because, after Rachel finds out her experiment was co-opted for this project, Toby tells her that basically because she signed the Official Secrets Act, all her work is basically the property of the British government, and she doesn't have a say in it. So Rachel, acting on her subconscious thoughts, amplified by Sinjin, does something. I'm not going to say what it was. And just towards the third act of the story, like I said, the tension is amazing. This is an edge of your seat thriller. We're also introduced to another character in this story named Julian. Julian is a psychiatrist. He's one of the agents who has been dispatched to interview the scientists and engineers on this project. And he is Allison's boyfriend. He's only mentioned in the first story and the third story, but he does play major roles in the second and fourth stories. And just given what happens to Julian throughout series 1, I wish more time had been focused on him and his relationship with Allison, because, their relationship is kind of weak. It's not established really well. And Karen Gledhill and this other actor whose name I'm forgetting, I apologize, they're obviously trying, but there's just not enough time devoted to their relationship to make you really feel for them. especially because, Sinjin preys on Allison's insecurities, also making her act irrationally, demanding some form of commitment from Julian. Conversely, Ian and Nadia don't have a lot of time together in this story, but via explanation, their relationship is kind of established really well, and their chemistry is great together. One more thing I will say, the ending to this story is absolutely shocking. Like, even though he's just kind of the government liaison, the politician, Toby is a bastard. And I mean that in the highest possible regard. He's kind of that bastard that you sort of love to hate, but he also holds his cards close to his chest. You never know what he's doing or what he's planning. And the ending of this story, the first time I heard it, my jaw dropped. It was spectacular. And in hindsight, it's also kind of interesting, just given the arc Toby himself goes on through these stories, through these sets. The Palage Project by Paul Finch is the third story in the set. After discovering a scene of industrial pollution with diseased fish, the countermeasures team decides to investigate a new power plant in the industrial town of Palage. This is a rare story, because we see Toby in the field in this. He doesn't do that often, but when he does, he is really good. They disguise themselves as, I think it was reporters. No, Toby disguises himself as another politician involved in the project, and basically, the countermeasures team are his crew, his secretary, his driver, what have you, to try and investigate what's going on. Including the project manager, Ken Temple. Sorry, I forget how I was trying to word that halfway through. Ken Temple is played by Stephen Grief, who I last talked about when I reviewed Sarah Jane Smith's Series 2. And he's also really good here. He turns on a dime so well. He plays nice, sweet, charming, charismatic. And then when the story demands him to, he can flip on a dime and turn cold, calculating villain. So good. And yeah, Ken Temple, the head of the Palage Project, is the villain. In one of the most bizarre plot twists in the story, again, this is kind of a weird one. Yeah, I wasn't very fond of this story, I'm not gonna lie, because it meanders. There we go. That's a good way of saying it. It meanders. The pacing is awful. Like, the first 30, 45 minutes of it is all set up. The team discovers this pollution going on, and then they go to Palage, which is the name of the town, which is all works on this power plant. And basically, we don't get answers or an explanation until the last third, and then they have to conclude it. God, sorry, this story is really meh, and meh titles are always hard to cover. But that being said, Temple's plan is absolutely insane. So he's kind of an environmentalist, I think, or an eco-terrorist or something. And he realizes the course Earth is set on, so he wants to ramp up production to build, to accelerate space travel, and so he can leave with a crew, with a portion of the human race, to colonize other planets. Even though the way he wants to ramp up production will destroy the Earth in the process. So he wants to save the human race by destroying the Earth. There are some good moments in this story, though, like the way the entire town of Palage reacts to the PA system that Temple has set up. Or, what else there? There is a minor character who, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name, who this story opens with him trying to escape, and we learn, the experiments performed on some of the personnel of Palage, and the way they're kind of, they've been changed. Again, this is one you kind of have to experience, and I don't want to go into it too much. And, the countermeasures team finds him and bring him back because it's the only medical facility for Miles. But yeah, I just don't know what to say. I'm sorry my review for this particular story is so bad. It's so meh. It was in one ear, out the other. my attention could not be retained for this story. I'm sorry. And let that be my review. It's got bad pacing and it's really dull that even the good performances can't help it. And the finale of Series 1, State of Emergency by Justin Richards. So this story opens with Rachel, who throughout Series 1 has been trying to figure out Schumann's teleportation device, finally thinking she's cracked the code. And she goes to share her notes with Sir Toby, hoping to get to perform experiments on it. The problem is, the teleportation device has seemingly disappeared. Not only that, everyone's getting reassigned. You know, Ian Gilmore is reassigned to security duty, and Rachel and Allison are assigned to investigate mysterious rumors of ghosts. What's going on? And meanwhile, I should have mentioned this too. Gilmore is assigned to someone from the military, someone named General Peters, who doesn't seem to be very happy with the current state of things. Well, what's going on? Well, it turns out that someone is using the teleportation device. Oh boy, how to approach this delicately? There is no way to approach it delicately, I'm sorry. So, turns out General Peters is using the teleportation device and Rachel's notes to summon bat creatures from another dimension. Don't ask, there's a lot in Threshold I didn't cover. In order to overthrow the current prime minister and put and declare a state of emergency and put the military in control. So the villain of this story, and the major plot of this story, is a bigoted nationalist who creates a conspiracy theory and then acts on it uses it as bleh, and then uses it as an excuse to enact a coup to overthrow the incumbent government. Boy, after January 6th, that hits differently. Oh god. And that's all I'm gonna say on the matter, just how close to home this story hits now. But General Peters is a fantastic villain, Right from his introduction, you get he's not a very pleasant person, but as the story goes on, you just see how dangerous he becomes. This is also the story where Toby's actions seemingly pay off. Like I said, all throughout Series 1, he's been very aloof, holding his cards to his chest. And here, we finally see what's been going on. He's been an ally of General Peters this entire time. No, he hasn't. He's been tricking General Peters into thinking he's an ally. Another great performance is from the actor playing Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister, who just refuses to bow down to General Peters at all. And, his scenes with Gilmore prior to him being arrested by Peters, and his scenes with Toby and General Peters are all fantastic. Those confrontations are just so brilliant and tense. There is another thing we have to talk about, because this is where the relationship between Julian and Allison, that I mentioned in Artificial Intelligence, comes to a head. And the lack of time they've had together really doesn't help this at all. It's plenty tense, but it leaves you kind of empty because we didn't get a lot of time with them together. So Julian has been a plant by General Peters. He's been trying to help General Peters this entire time. He had no desire to marry Allison, and he was only using her to try and get information on the countermeasures team. That's how they got the teleporter and Rachel's notes. And in the ensuing confrontation, after Allison finds out the truth and then tries to stop him, she kills Julian. It's devastating. It's brilliantly devastating. But again, because their chemistry was never quite there, and because of the lack of time focused on their relationship, it doesn't just hit like it should. But the rest of State... I feel like I've been kind of talking it down, but State of Emergency is actually really good. like I said, the first half, it focuses on this really great mystery. The team has been split up against their wishes and they don't know what's going on. And as the pieces start fitting together, it leads to this brilliant conclusion. And I really don't think there's much else to say, so let's head to the overview. Boy, it's been a while since I've done a box set, and I think the quality of this review kind of shows. Hopefully, as I keep doing these, I'll get better at them again, but before I get into my thoughts on the overview, I'll do the story ranking first. So for me, the weakest story was the Palage Project. The next two, I'm just going to call it a tie, because they're both really good, despite some hiccups, but I just can't decide which one I like more. So the Palage Project is the weakest, then a tie between Threshold and State of Emergency, and then my favorite story in this set was Artificial Intelligence. Countermeasures Series 1 is a very promising start to the Countermeasures series, again, despite some hiccups. Mainly the sound design, as I mentioned, which is all over the place. First of all, I really like, there's this kind of, what's the word? Muffled or clipped quality to it. In talking about it, David Richardson, Ken Bentley, and John Dorney said they wanted it to kind of have this 60s feel to it. They wanted it to feel like a 60s series. And for the most part, they succeed, especially in the sound design. But like I said, there are a lot of moments, like the opening to Threshold, I didn't really talk about many of the others, that are just incoherent noise. Like I said, you have no idea what's going on. I don't think the sound design is as inconsistent in the later releases, but here it is kind of a problem. But, the quality of the stories themselves mostly more than make up for it, as do the fantastic performances. Everyone is immediately at the top of their game. From Simon Williams as Gilmore, who... What's the word? I totally just lost my train of thought. Who, comes off as this strict, uptight military man, but he does have moments of vulnerability. Like in Artificial Intelligence, his entire B-plot with Nadia. Or when, throughout the course of the stories, when Rachel or Allison are threatened, just the concern he shows for them. Or similarly, in Artificial Intelligence, he shows how sore he is that Rachel took his spot as being in charge of countermeasures away from him. And, the other performances are great too. Like I mentioned, Pamela Salem as Rachel throughout this series, who is really well handled. I love just how smart and strong Rachel is. Like, she is the only person who does not put up with Toby and his stuff, let's just say, because he kind of holds countermeasures with an iron fist, kind of because he has to, just because of, countermeasures' relationship with the government. And Rachel is the only one who really pushes back against him. Also, her dual performance in Artificial Intelligence, as I just mentioned, is brilliant and terrifying. Karen Gledhill is really good too, like I said, but she doesn't really have much to do in this set. I think she will in future sets. Again, it's been a while since I've listened to the Countermeasure series, so there's a lot I don't remember. But yeah, here she is kind of the weak link, not because she's bad, she's also great, but because she doesn't have as much material to work with. And then Hugh Ross is Toby Kinsella, who, as I just said, is an utter bastard. And he does aloof so well that when you finally learn where his loyalties lie and he betrays General Peters in State of Emergency, you kind of can't help but cheer. And, Toby, out of the entire team, is the only one who's really willing to get his hands dirty. Like, he does some I was about to say incomprehensible, but that's not the right word. He does some abhorrent stuff throughout this. Like I said, inconsistent sound design, maybe a little too ambitious for a beginning, but Countermeasures Series 1 is a great start to the series. And join me next month when we will look at Series 2. But those are just my thoughts. Have you heard Countermeasures Series 1? Have I convinced you to check it out? Please start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload, and in the description box below you will find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.